smart enough to win. That's how the story starts. Learning is the edge that sets your work apart. When the stakes get high and the pressure never stops, smart learning in your pocket puts your business at the top.
Welcome to the Learning Advantage, from Insight to Impact, where we're going to show how smart learning fuels real business results. I'm Deb Laurel, and I'm your host. Hello, and welcome to you for joining us today. For over 40 years, Laurel and Associates Limited has worked alongside national and international managers to help them build their confidence in their own competence, to successfully manage employees and create and maintain a positive, healthy, and supportive work environment where employees want to stay and do their best. We focus on making lackluster leaders legendary. The purpose of the Learning Advantage, from Insight to Impact, is to discuss how smart learning fuels real business results. In each episode, we strive to deliver actionable strategies, evidence-based design tips, and real-world case studies that show how learning strengthens organizational health, advances sustainability, and drives profitability. And for that reason, I'm delighted to introduce our guest today, Ethan Chazin. As the founder of the Chazin Group, Ethan applies nearly 40 years of experience leading teams through transformation. He loves to help small businesses gain competitive advantage by increasing profitability through employee performance and productivity gains. This allows him to maximize their employee ROI as investment and work with them to build compassionate workplace cultures built on people-first strategies. He's a certified Goldman Sachs 1000 Small Businesses, Extended Disc, Kauffman Foundation, DDI, and Six Boxes coach, trainer, and public speaker. His passion is applying employee engagement and professional development through training and coaching to unleash employee untapped potential. In other words, he's a results-driven talent and culture transformation coach. Welcome, Ethan.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted that you're here. So we're going to get right into the questions.
Let's do this.
All right. When you think about learning as a competitive advantage, what does that mean in the context of your organization or your work?
Learning is the lever to pull for your people investment strategy. Learning and the application of the learning into the workflow process is your ability to unleash your employees' performance and productivity. And so it's really a two-pronged approach when we talk about learning. The first is the on-the-job aspect, which is being able to gather the knowledge, the tools, the resources to do your work in your current role more effectively. But there's another second lever that you pull as an organization, and that is to prepare that individual for the what's next. And far too often, organizations are solely piece, which is filling vacancies. They're filling roles. And they have somebody leaves, they bring somebody else in. And that really minimizes the potential positive impact of what that employee can bring to the table, because you're not leveraging the other things that they have to offer that may not be utilized in that role, that could be further developed to either promote them up, or, as we know, organizations are flattening, so there's not much vertical mobility, but also to think about succession planning in terms of moving them throughout your business. So the learning is, when I think of learning, I think of two considerations: maximizing performance in current role and giving them the learning tools they need to apply it in their current job. And the second, as I said, was to develop them for career and professional success in the what comes next.
And so you're building on their strengths.
Which requires a fundamental rethinking of your workforce. Absolutely, Deborah, you nailed it. It's moving away from hiring based on job descriptions, which is so very 20th century, and moving, hello, welcome, join us in the 21st century, where you're thinking about changing your interviewing and your recruiting to go to what we call behavioral modeling, where we look for attributes and characteristics of people who are growth mindset, Carolyn Dweck, they're lifelong learners, they're intrinsically motivated, but they work well in teams, they're natural born leaders. And the way you do that is to figure out how to ask the right questions and learn the right things to make sure that they fit. And the other piece I hope we'll talk about a little bit, which is a passion of mine, is applying learning as a characteristic that you recruit for in building a very specific kind of culture.
Tell us more.
Oh, for sure. Well, the culture, a lot of people get bogged down in what a definition of culture is. You don't need to worry about it. A culture is how your people feel and interact every day, whether it's virtual, in office, or some hybrid setup. But what you want in a learning organization is people to not only pursue learning for their own advancement, but it's also emphasizing the culture value of learning as part of team building, project coordination, and also collaboration. Look, that's the buzzword, collaboration. We have self-managed teams in a lot of these organizations. People have to learn how to interact with each other, and they have to learn about themselves, which is soft skill, emotional intelligence, and they have to learn about each other. So the learning is, if you think about a wheel, it goes throughout the rungs. It also goes in and out of the organization, not just up and down.
Okay, so we have a very clear idea of how learning can make a big difference to how the culture works, how people work within that culture.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest barrier preventing organizations? I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Can you share?
I'll go where you lead. I will follow you.
I will follow you. Can you share a specific example where a learning initiative moved from insight to real impact and how you measured that impact?
That's a really, really important question, because what we haven't talked about yet, and to be honest, what a lot of organizations don't think through when they talk about learning and applying learning into their organization, is the measurement of it. So if you don't know what you want to be the outcome of the learning initiative, meaning the delta, the before and after, if you're not prepared to measure it, you, like anything else, Deborah, you don't know if you're going to be successful. So a really interesting engagement that I had a few years back was New Jersey's largest federal credit union, about 500 employees. It was at the time that I published my second book, which is called The Compassionate Organization. And I gave a talk to a group of thought leaders in New Jersey. And one of them was the head of HR in this organization. And she pulled me aside afterwards and said, you know, we have a problem. We have a really, really strong leadership team, but we don't know how to create a succession plan with future leaders. And so, as you were kind enough to share in my introduction, I have a number of coaching frameworks, methodology, certifications. One of them is I'm an extended DISC personality assessment coach. And so I asked the woman who I was speaking with, to what extent do you have a company-wide initiative where you're able to measure every single employee's personality assessment for purposes of doing training and development, learning to teach them how to be leaders in their teams, but also as a way for a succession plan of promoting them into leadership roles? And so she shared with me that they did this assessment to the leadership team, but they stopped at that point and didn't have that trickle down. So during about a 9-month engagement, I facilitated implementing this, what we call extended DISC, to the next level down, the management level, and then frontline staff. And we were able to, after the 9 months, give a assessment to every individual, that I led the training and development across the functional areas and in all of the teams so that they knew how to track their own comfort level with communication, with learning, with team building, as well as with each other. And as a result of that, they went from having approximately 75% turnover rate on an annual basis of their customer service individuals to down around 2-3%.
Oh my.
So in one calendar year, we removed the cost of replacing nearly, for the better part of 100 people, because the learning program, in addition to training them how to think about themselves and others, we don't talk about this piece of learning. By putting your employees through a learning initiative, you're showing commitment to them. And that commitment is what a lot of Gen Zs and younger millennials are looking for. They want to know that they have an opportunity to grow, not just advance, but grow. And that's a really powerful selling point of learning. So I would say that that was a really fun initiative of taking the concept of learning, applying it throughout an organization, and seeing how well received it was once we implemented it.
Oh, that's a wonderful example. And we see so much about how learning is so important for retention, because it's not even just those generations that are interested in growing.
Well, we talk about some things that are instrumental to developing individuals and creating a culture that builds a strong bond, loyalty, trust. And that's not something you're given. You don't expect your children to give it to you as parents. You don't expect your friends in your relationships to give it to you. Trust has to be earned. And we know that it can take a long time to build trust and just one discrete act to destroy it. So learning is kind of cool because it shows that commitment. However, I would say that the misapplication of learning is to give it without having it be applied to an individual's workflow. So one of the other aspects of my work is re-architecting, re-engineering individual goals, team goals, and business goals so that they make sense. If you're going to, as my manager, Deborah, make me go through a learning initiative to take that new information and apply it on the job, I want you to re-architect my KPIs, my goals, so that you're going to measure my use of that new learning in my job. And so those are some things that just are anecdotal behavior modification we want to do in learning organizations. By the way, another great mistake that's made is we command learning. We force learning, which means the employee herself or him or themselves don't have skin in the game. Part of your career and professional development work with your employees means you should have a section on learning. And the learning is next 30 days, this quarter, this year. And you come to agreement, but the agreement entails the employee having ownership of the learning. And you may want to give them a stipend, an annual budget, and the tools and the resources. And this is where the 6 boxes coaching comes in. But employees have to own their own learning. But they can't own the learning until they know what their career trajectory is so that they can plan out. So the learning shouldn't just be for right now. It should be growing with them.
I heard a very sad story about an organization that provided tuition reimbursement, presumably supported training, but there was no time allotted for that learning.
Isn't that an interesting message?
The employee had to put the tuition on a credit card and then wait for reimbursement. So the employees were not taking advantage of that learning opportunity because it really wasn't provided in a sincere, authentic way.
That is such a sad, you're so right. That is such a sad, and you know, it makes it even sadder. I see this pretty much on a daily basis. And my sweet spot are small to mid-sized businesses, or what you'd call micro businesses of anywhere from like 50 employees up to like 300 or 400. And they do this all the time. They offer what they think are this incredibly altruistic, wonderful benefits. But first of all, they're handing it to their employees saying, here, you do this. the employees didn't have ownership in it, and it wasn't sincere. And you only do that once and you destroy your reputational brand. I mean, you do that kind of thing once, and your employees know that you have absolutely no vested interest in my development. I received the message loud and clear. Thank you. I'll be updating my resume and my LinkedIn profile. For sure.
So this leads us neatly to what do you see as the biggest barrier preventing organizations from fully embracing lifelong learning? And how do you think we can overcome it?
We can't. They need to die or retire. And I'm going to be very blunt right now, because as I was thinking about this for the last 17 years, the short answer is you don't make a commitment to your people unless you say our people are not payroll. They're not an expense to be managed. When I talk to founders, owners, CEOs, leadership team members, the mindset is still, when you talk about employees, they use a very interesting word. They call their employees assets. That's a very specific accounting term. People are your only lasting competitive advantage. So the way to leverage lifelong learning is to truly change your culture where you value your employees to the extent that they have ownership in the company. That's why ESOPs are so important. That's why you want to hire people with a certain set of, as we said, behaviors or attributes. It's why you want to get rid of control over them. Daniel Pink talks about autonomy. And he says that giving your employees autonomy means 4 kinds of autonomy. They choose who they work with, where they work from, when they work, and what they work on. And so fundamentally, the only way to create lifelong learning in the 21st century transformational company is to give up control. And what that means is a requisite ownership maturity to say we trust our people. Well, no, you don't, because you're still managing them. If you think about what the word manage means, whether it's Latin mano agere or French management, it means to control employees. You can't get to true bona fide lifelong learning until you change your mindset and your behaviors as an organization. And it's very, very easy to say our people are our greatest asset, or sure, we invest in our people. We have tuition reimbursement. But it's how you put it into practice. And you have to model out this next 21st century company based on those who have already been doing. So Nucor Steel, Wegmans, Trader Joe's, Chobani, Patagonia, Kind, Ben and Jerry's. There are all these companies that already have that model. You just need to care enough to go out and figure out how to bring it into your organization. And I'm not seeing it yet. Oh, and we're not even going to talk about AI, because that's another minefield.
You don't want to talk about it?
It's a really fascinating thing. It's, in many regards, it's truly transformational as a technology, but we've been there before with the concept of a technological advancement that could potentially pose a threat to human capital or the worker. And so the question that's going to beg asking is, how do you incorporate this incredibly powerful tool called AI with the human beings who are going to use it? And I'll tell you what I've seen, Deborah, this year and last year, because you've probably seen it too. Big corporations, in anticipation of how AI is going to replace the need for workers, they're laying off thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. At UPS, at Estee Lauder, at Amazon, they're laying off tens of thousands of people. But I'm seeing every day, I have conversations with small business owners, and they're talking about, I'm going to lay off X percent of my workforce. And I go, why? You had a really, really good financial quarter. Yeah, we think AI is going to reduce the need for headcount. That tells you everything you need to know about company investment in employee learning. That statement in and of itself speaks volumes. That's where mindset is. You need to get to a 21st century learning organization when you value your people so much that you're constantly asking, what do they need from us to be successful? So the mind shift is, I don't manage them. I'm responsible for giving them the tools, the resources, the learning, the coaching, the mentoring, the support, whatever they need. But I also need to create a culture that enables them to be their best version of themselves. And that's transformative.
That is transformative.
For sure. Absolutely. I agree.
In your view, what's the one outdated belief about corporate learning that we need to let go of, and what should replace it?
I think a lot about some of the pitfalls of learning. And I've always felt that there was too much emphasis on the learning requirement for the job at hand. There was too much, well, the extent that most of my learning, initial engagements with clients is about training and development for current role. And there's not enough consideration, to a fault. There's not enough company consideration of learning for the trajectory of the employee's tenure and how they grow with you. And I think that's logical to a sad extent, because employees are not seen to be long-term investments. They're seen to be a set of solutions to a set of tasks that need to be performed now. So the learning, and we talk about this in a lot of my work with clients when they're asking me how to put together workforces, it's talent acquisition for the right now. And so the learning they talk about is to give people more ability to do on the job. So a lot of my learning coaching work is on the job training, but there's not enough consideration to the development of the employee over time. Where do you see her in 6 months? She may be analytical and you have her in a finance role or a bookkeeping role, but she would be really good in digital media because she has a flair for social platforms, but she also knows how to get into the numbers. There should be a clear trajectory in the next 3 or 4 months of learning from this role to that role. And so that's I think, an outdated idea of learning needs to be learning on the job for the task at hand.
And if people would take on this thought that we've got to be planning ahead for what people need to grow, we wouldn't be laying people off. We would be looking at how do we best use their strengths? What are those strengths? How do we build on them? Mm-hmm. Where are we going as an organization, and how will they get us there?
Well, I don't think I need to speak as a guest anymore, because you pretty much just hit the ball out of the park. That's amen, sister. That's there. I would say that the greatest fundamental challenge in my line of work in terms of creating a powerful organization that unleashes employee untapped potential is to get to the heart of the mindset of measuring employee ROI. So don't consider learning as a kindness that you're doing. Rethink, transform your mindset as a leader or a founder into learning is an incredibly important tool that you're arming your workforce with to give lasting competitive advantage, because the final frontier, the final battle is going to be around talent. It's happening now and it will continue. So what that means is you have tens of thousands of boomers and matures leaving the workforce every day. The American workforce is being reconstituted along generational lines where Gen Zs born between 1996 and 2010 and millennials born between 96 and 2010, they're comprising a larger percent of the workforce, and they are now reconstituting your leadership ranks. Their expectations about the relationship between employee and employer are fundamentally different than when you and I kind of came into our careers and progressed. They want work that matters. They want learning to be tailored to their interests, their hobbies, their passions. They want their voice to matter. They may not have anything to say being a Gen Z, but they want to be contributing. They want to do cool work. And here's the other thing that's really fascinating about that generation. They expect your organization's values to reflect theirs. And nothing speaks more to being a transformational organization than investing in your people through learning that matters in terms of the work they're doing and where they're going with you. Because like you said, they'll leave. That's the biggest complaint I get with business owners with Gen Zs. They're not loyal. Well, of course they are. I've taught over 5,000 of them at 10 colleges in 17 years. They're loyal. You're just not creating a very nurturing environment that's developing them. Like you said, Deborah, for the what comes next. They want to see a path, literally during their orientation.
How are you leveraging data, technology, or new learning methods to create more personalized and effective learning experiences?
Ooh, tough questions. All these tough questions. My utilization of data is based on two kinds. The individual data, like at the individual level, the individual employee, and also organizationally. So I'll come in and my discovery, my upfront consult has changed over the years. Right now, the way I gather data is it's all informal. It's all conversational, meaning it's interviews, whether they're one-on-one or me talking to groups. And I no longer allow the leadership team or the owner or the CEO or executive director to speak to me first. That's the last data input. So I go out into the organization and I conduct a series of, usually in the first month, a representative sample of the most important stakeholder group, their employees. Then I go to their clients, existing clients and clients who have left them. I go to contract workers, 1099s, W-4s. I go to vendors, partners, suppliers, contractors, and I create a 360 holistic view of the reputation. So I've actually gone against the data grain. I'm not incorporating AI or data feeds. I'm doing more impersonal. I want to know what the reputation of this company is. Then I'll go to the leadership team and I'll have a series of conversations. And I look at the delta between what leadership is saying about its people and then what people are saying they want as far as learning, training, development, career opportunities. So I aggregate all of that data in terms of what's being said about the company. And then I go to the people who are in the leadership team. And anecdotally, about 9 times out of 10, there's a significant divide. Leadership is often very out of touch with the practical reality of the culture of the company. And so I talk about low-hanging fruit. Here are the things we can do as far as learning that are immediate. Implement a career and development program. Have a coaching and mentoring program. Have a series of sponsors who are going to take ownership of employees that they think are high potential and may put them into a promotion advancement role. The other thing is, and this isn't necessarily learning, but it's a result of effective learning happening. I fund what's called an idea generation program. And all world-class organizations, the best to look at is Samsung. You solicit ideas from your employees, and I build these out, that can do one of two things: increase revenue for the company or reduce cost. So the employees are closest to work. We do the learning to develop them to perform on the job, but we also solicit the ideas from them because they're the ones who are making sure the processes, the procedures, the work itself is done efficiently. So that's a manifestation of good learning, is the application of what they learned to be more successful and productive. The other thing is, I've used data. There is one capacity. I'm starting to use data much more analytically. Goal setting. There is a book he was at one point the head of global research at ADP. His name is Marcus Buckingham. He talked about the 9 fallacies of work. And one of them is this idea that goal setting actually motivates employees. One of the greatest harms that you can do to employees is goal setting, because you're setting their goals. So I've done research into human capital over the last 30 years of organizational behavior research, and I look at the impact of goal setting on individuals, and we know that it has absolutely no positive impact and probably has a toxic impact. Instead, I look at what it means to be what's called in flow. And in flow means when an employee is applying their learning and they're learning new things, and the work they're doing is so challenging that there's such a high rate of potential failure, but they're using all of that learning in the job, that it's called being in a state of flow where, honestly, Deborah, you lose track of time. You look at your watch and go, oh my God, I started this 5 hours ago. It felt like 15 minutes. Where did the time go? They were in a state of flow. So that's the data I use, the data that talks about the fallacy of motivation and what really does motivate people who are hardwired to learn. They want to apply the learning. And often they don't have an opportunity to.
Yes, that's for years and years. I've done management training and have had and employee training and have had groups in both come up and say, this is great, but how do we get our managers to buy in?
Oh my goodness, thank you.
Be allowed to use what we were just taught.
Thank you. And isn't it interesting that the people who are in the training programs, who are desirous of acquiring the learning, that they are lifelong learners, that they see some value, that they do want that own personal satisfaction of being able to learn and apply the learning. And then all of a sudden that, as you said, that divide between their ability to embrace it and management's empowering of them having the opportunities to use it. See, that's where great trainers have no chance but to fail. You bring me in, you have said, you being the leadership team, you want to train these customer call center or these account management staff or these data analysts. You want to train them on this latest technology or this system or something. What happens after you and I leave the training? How are you going to measure? How are you going to check in with them? How are they going to embrace it on the job? Are you going to redesign their job? These are the things I recommend they do. But yeah, yes, that's why learning, the greatest fallacy is that it'll be successful when it's not implemented. There's no buy-in top down. There's no champion and by the way, championing learning means you commit initially not to a 1, but a 2-year learning program, because the first year is trial and error, but you have to show commitment to fund it in the second year. And right now in this business environment, you and I both know, with all the chaos and uncertainty, I'm struggling because a lot of companies won't even make an investment in their people. Why should I invest in them, Deborah? I'm going to lay off 25% of them because of AI.
Right.
Yeah. Or because our largest trading partner was Canada and now they're snuggling up to China. But that's a separate conversation.
I think you've answered this question more than one time, but I'm going to give it to you again. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who want to build a true culture of continuous learning, what would it be?
I'll start out by making a very dramatic comment, and I'll back my way into an explanation. Earn your title. You want to be a leader? There's all different, and I've taught leadership, and people have the fallacy of I'm a leader. No, you're not. You're a manager. A leader, the classic saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you want to be a leader, and I mean a truly transformational leader, understand that you have absolutely no power. The only power that you possess is in your role serving those people. Why are you getting the title leader? You have to have people who are going to follow you. Following is a decision that people make. Otherwise, if they have no choice, you're a manager, and that's bad. So my advice for leaders is think backwards. You have nothing to do with the consideration of or definition of what makes a leader. Your people define your success or failure as a leader. So work backwards from literally, if you want to have a come to Jesus moment, you ask your people whether they've been with you for a month or years. I want to find out from you, Deborah, we've been working together for 3 years now. Have you gotten everything that you need from me? Have I been a bottleneck? Have I facilitated when you've needed resources, you've needed a champion? Have I been there for you? Yes, wonderful. When? How did that make you feel? No? Why not? When was it? What could I do differently? In the next 30 days, in this year, what do you anticipate in your life that I can be there for? Get to know people. In the 80s, it was easy. We called it MBWA, management by walking around. Get to know your people's hopes, fears, desires. I'll give you an example. There's a lovely company called AT&T. A few months back, the CEO told all 100,000 workers, starting in January, this past January, all of you are going to come into the office RTO 5 days a week. Wait. Let's just pretend I'm a woman who's in her 40s. I'm a sandwich caregiver in my home. I have somebody who's older than me who needs my care, and I have children who need my care. You're telling me I have to come in 5 days a week? It takes me 2 hours each way. Really? You want to be a leader? My advice is start with your people. Figure out their hopes, their fears, their dreams, their desires, and then figure out how you can be a servant master and serve them. Other than that, this is all wasted conversation. And if you can't think of an altruistic reason about the greater good to do this, then be selfish. Your evaluation, your whatever goals that you have that are metric based on performance of your people, they will rise if you treat your people with a certain type of leadership. Because if you don't, the great people are going to silent quit. They're going to emotionally detach, and they're just going to leave. And you'll say, I didn't know. And they'll say, well, the writing was on the wall. Or if you have bad people, they'll stay in that role because you're giving them the indentured servitude of a paycheck. But it's time to have those conversations right now. If you want to be a leader and lead, reach out to your people and start to have these potentially scary but enlightening conversations. They'll tell you. And change your hiring, for goodness sakes. Jack Welch spent 40 years at GE. He rises up from chemical engineer to be CEO of GE, and he decides immediately about getting that anointed CEO title. I'm going to lay off. He tells every manager, effective immediately, lay off 20% of our workforce in your division, because there are A's and B's and C's. The A's are the stars. We don't have to worry about them. They're shining, whatever. Our B's are technically proficient. They need a little bit of carrot and stick, but they can be B's. Our C's, we got to get rid of them. Why do you have C's in your organization? Better yet, Deborah, why do you have B's? It's a rhetorical question. We know the answer, but hopefully our audience will start to kind of connect the dots. Your culture. If you have a culture that embraces the kind of treatment of employees where you lead them, they'll follow you anywhere. They'll take a pay cut. They'll accept you shifting their hours from full-time to maybe near full-time or part-time because they want so badly to be a part of this thing where they feel like, if anybody is listening, go watch a YouTube of Chef Jose Andres at World Central Kitchen. You want to see an amazing organization of leaders? Go watch a YouTube on him.
All right. One last question.
Yes, ma'am.
What's one book, resource, or learning experience that has had a lasting impact on you personally? And he's reaching for it. Compassionate Organization, your book.
So I was not going to ever mention that, but I have been doing this for 17 years, and I spent 20 years in corporate America, nearly all of it in banking and financial services. So I know what a toxic organization looks like. But I've always been wondering, Deborah, early on in my consulting life, are there any characteristics of those organizations anywhere in the world who have outperformed every other competitor? So they're either number one or number two financially in their industry or sector. And I thought about it so much that it was bothering me and I couldn't sleep. And I said to my wife, I'm going to start to research this. So I thought it would be a month, and then it became a few months, and then after the first year, and then it became a few years, and then after about 9 years, my wife said, "You ever going to finish that?" And I said, "I'm finally ready." And I discovered something that after nearly a decade of research, looking at over 200 countries and over 7,000 companies, I discovered that there is only, to my ability to find it after a decade, one characteristic that every amazing organization possesses that allows it to outperform all of its competitors. And here's the cool part. It had nothing to do with the leadership team, nothing to do with the industry or sector, nothing to do with the country.
Oh dear, you froze. Come back, come back.
And that one thing was an amazing workplace culture. And regardless of how you define it, writing that book has led me absolutely certain that when I'm talking to somebody about learning and employees gathering skills that they need to do the work and then being able to advance and feeling like they have a home, I'm saying this to your audience: the most successful financial impactful thing you can do is commit to your employees. They're not an afterthought. They're not an expense to be managed called payroll. It's not goodwill on your financial statements. Your people are your only lasting competitive advantage. So that's my answer. It's called The Compassionate Organization, and it's my second book, and it's available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
All right. Thank you, Ethan. This has been fantastic. How do people get in touch with you?
Oh boy. They can find me on LinkedIn, Ethan Chazin, and they can also email me, and it's ethan@thechazingroup. And if they're really interested, I produced over 800 videos on my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and look for the Chazin Group.
Thank you. And thank you for listening in and participating in our conversation. I hope that you learned as much as I did from this session. Join us next week on August 16th as we meet with Laura Lingner, a fractional COO and growth partner who supports founder-led and investor-backed teams through scale and transition. And please remember that Laurel and Associates is always focused on making lackluster leaders legendary as smart learning fuels real business results. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Learning Advantage from Insight to Impact. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Every lesson, every workshop, every failed attempt you save becomes a map upon the desktop, shows the road